Dear Stana, the steamer Winfield Scott, in which Sully embarked from home, was, as you know, wrecked on a small island not far from Santa Barbara. Some of the passengers must have found woe beyond them. This morning, 2 steamers started to their relief. Fortunately, the weather has been mild. Had it rained, as is usually the case in December, the passengers must have suffered much. My best regards to your family. Believe me, always your servant, William T. Sherman. General Sherman's letter concerning the sinking of the SS Winfield Scott in 1850 relates to a story popularly embodied by that of the Titanic. A story in which glamour and ambition are humbled by perilous seas, claimed by the meek. But the Winfield Scott is only one of 700 wrecks that line the depths of the Santa Barbara Channel. The channel runs about 80 miles along the coast of California, where the land trends east to west. At the westernmost end of the channel, the coast veers off sharply, beginning a north to south trend, where the warmer waters of the channel meet up with cold, deep ocean upwelling. It is here, at a conflux of wind, current, and temperature, that a small sliver of land ekes out from the south-facing coast, just as it turns northward. Point Conception. Of the 700 ships ensnared in the channel, over 500 lie beneath the treacherous waters around Point Conception, which provide for some of the roughest conditions on the western coast due to hazardous winds, fogs, and currents. There's nothing to suggest any other cause for these wrecks, but there are, nonetheless, those who believe supernatural forces are to blame. Spanish mariners passing through the northern entrance to the channel contributed to the first facet of what would eventually become a prevalent superstition. They called the rocky outcroppings just off of Point Arguellos the Devil's Jaw. It sits only a few miles from the mouth of the channel and has become part of the lore surrounding Point Conception. On September 8, 1923, 9 Clemson-class destroyers slipped unknowingly between its jagged teeth.
Well, the Honda disaster happened in 1923, September 8th, 9th, around 9 o'clock at night. It's considered the largest disaster for our U.S. Navy during peacetime. We lost 7 ships in that disaster. It certainly was a big news story back then. It's still not something the Navy likes to talk about very much, but it's still everybody in the Navy remembers it and knows about it, and certainly a big part of our history here in Santa Barbara County in Central California. It's hard to imagine, unless you're actually there, what it was like for those officers and crew members that night. But you're talking a heavy, heavy fog where visibility was 20, 30 feet. Those boats were only about 250 yards apart. They were going 20 knots, so they're only about, that's 11 yards a second. So within 30 seconds, one boat hits, and 30 seconds later, another boat hits. The water is very turbulent there. You got different currents. You got rocks that you can't see. They're very, very sharp. They were cutting themselves. A lot of these crew members didn't even have clothes. I mean, they were just in their underwear because they were below deck sleeping. This happened at night, and all of a sudden, the ship's cruising along 20 knots. That's probably 30, 35 miles an hour to a dead stop. They got thrown out of their bunks. They got banged up, and then they just ran to get up on deck. Seeing your buddies flying off a ship into the water, you can't see them. You can probably hear screams, but you don't see, and you can't rescue anybody for the most part. And it's got to be a very, very tragic experience for these men. It's something that they would never forget in their lives.
The austere forces of the ocean make a convenient and mute culprit for all manner of disaster and threat. But before vilifying nature, we should first consider our own capacity for destruction. Shipwrecks and the history surrounding them serve as eerie reminders of the ocean's power. But the sinking isn't the whole of it. Their stories continue, often beyond the point where human tales end. Because it extends south along the east to west trending coast, Point Conception is the only place in the continental United States where one can watch the sun both rise and set over the Pacific Ocean. For the local Chumash, Point Conception is a sacred site. It is known as the Western Gate, a portal in which spirits of the dead depart from the mortal realm, passing into the afterlife and beginning the journey to paradise. As such, the point is treated with reverence, to be cherished rather than feared. Point Conception is a place of duality, between light and dark, life and death. Most of all, though, it is, as the Chumash consider it, a place of rebirth. Currently, modern civilization is only able to function through the consumption of oil. We have built the foundations of our industry largely upon the fossilized remains of prehistoric algae that have formed over millions of years. But for the creatures of the ocean, what we leave behind often becomes a source of vitality far more quickly.
An artificial reef is any structure that's put in the water by humans. And it can be things made out of rocks, like a breakwater, or things made out of steel, like an oil platform, or things made out of a whole bunch of stuff, like a sunken ship. All of those are artificial reefs, and they can be put down intentionally to make a reef, or like a sunken ship, or like an oil platform, unintentionally acting as reefs. Now, as far as shipwrecks are concerned and how different they are from any other reef material, they may not be. For most fish, they don't really care what the stuff is that they're associating with. So they're just as happy associating with a piece of steel as a rock, for instance. Or they're just as happy associating with a tire as a pipe. So as far as fishes are concerned, a shipwreck is just another bunch of stuff. What's always interesting is no matter what you put in the ocean, eventually nature is going to reclaim it one way or another. The classic examples are all of the sunken World War II vessels that are lying in the South Pacific that are now just covered in coral. And as far as anyone is concerned, and anyone can tell, these things are just coral reefs now. Clearly they weren't when they were sunk, but they're now covered in invertebrates, and this happens all over the world. It doesn't matter where you go. If something falls in the ocean, and it can be anywhere from a Coke bottle to a ship or to a oil platform, within a very short period of time, invertebrates are going to land on it, fishes are going to associate with it, crabs are going to crawl on it, and at some point it's going to be unrecognizable as artificial structure.
A broken ship sinks to the ocean floor as far more than a lifeless husk. It is a seed born of tragedy that nonetheless goes on to foster new life beneath the ocean waves.